thank you very much for coming in and joining us. We have 1 hour very short presentation. Actually, it's not like a lecture or anything. It's going to be interaction, and I'm pretty sure you guys will appreciate what we are trying to share with you. And I really wanted to thank all my fellow officers. This is their day off, but they are going to spend their time with us to share this important information. So please feel free to ask questions and engage with the presentation. And with that, I'm going to invite Dr. Jayasekara to introduce the officers, and maybe they can introduce themselves.
Yes.
And actually, he did all the legwork, so I'm going to let you can start.
Introduce yourself. Yes.
I'm pretty sure most of you know me, right? I'm Commander Mallu Awadu. I work with the United States Public Health Service. I work at Centers for Medicare and Medicaid program and the Medicare Part B drug payment policies.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Commander Ranjot Gill. I work at NIH, NIAID, infectious disease program, managing their vaccine research. We're happy to be here presenting. We're going to introduce our team. I have a request for everyone. Because we're recording, everybody should just move in. Come forward. Because we want this to be a communication exchange. So please come forward, move in here, and we can listen to you. We could record the voices and the questions that we have. And we want this to be an interactive experience. So come on forward. None of us are going to bite you.
We won't bite.
We won't bite. It's nice space here. Okay. Come forward.
Good morning. I am Tiffany Pham. I am currently with SAMHSA. If you don't know, it's Substance Abuse Mental Health Services. It's located in Rockville, Maryland. I'm a clinical social worker by trade. Thank you for having me here today.
I'm Melissa Reyes. I'm a physician, and so I work at the FDA. I work with the pharmaceutical companies to make sure that they develop and study new drugs for people who have skin diseases.
Lieutenant Commander Kelly Neal. I work with ICE in DC with Health IT.
I'm Suresh Jayasekara. I work at the FDA.
Vicky Sue. I work at the FDA. My job is clinical pharmacology. My goal is to get the dose right for oncology and hematology drugs.
Okay, with that, I'm going to invite you to briefly explain who we are and what we do.
We got one more. We have a special guest as well, another clinician in the audience. Young, right? Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, good morning. Young Huang, I'm a clinical psychologist. Work with the Department of State. And so we cover pretty much all of the countries that we have a good traumatic relationship with, especially with the Sri Lankan community last week due to recent bombing. So weeks ago, so we've been supporting that community as well.
So as you know, we got a wealth of experience in this room. We're going to stay late after this to ask questions, concerns, comments, and then we'll get the presentation started. But we'll be here for any questions you have.
Please feel free to reach us and ask if you had to ask anything. And we can share a copy of the presentation, and we have a lot of resources, links. We can share all of them at the end of the presentation.
So I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you, Suresh, for the opportunity to speak with you all. He asked me to give a little introduction to the United States Public Health Service. For those of you who may not be familiar with us, specifically to explain a little bit about who we are and what we do. So the USPHS, we have a rich history dating back to 1798. We started off as the Marine Hospital Services to care and treat Marine sailors. Today, we're one of America's 7 uniformed services. The others, of course, being Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, and the NOAA Commission Corps. We are made up of over 6,000 public health professionals. Most of us have some kind of advanced degree that can be applied towards public health. We fit in a number of different professional categories. For example, we have physicians, engineers, dentists, nurses, pharmacists. Our officers are spread throughout the country at various federal agencies. Most of our local officers here serve the HHS agencies such as FDA, NIH, and SAMHSA. However, we can also be stationed at non-HHS agencies such as the BOP, the Bureau of Prisons, or at ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Our uniforms, you may notice, look a lot like the Navy and Coast Guard uniforms, and that's because they are. We wear the Navy and Coast Guard uniforms, however, we have the PHS insignia on the uniforms. Our core values are leadership, integrity, excellence, and service, and those are values that we strive forward every day. As part of our process to become a commissioned Corps officer in the PHS, we have to go through OBC, which is Officer Basic Course. It's also known as the Officer Boot Camp. And Suresh and I were actually classmates at OBC 101. And each OBC class we have our motto, and our motto was OBC 101, we get it done. So you can see in this picture on the very left side, you see Suresh, and he's someone that I think really represents the core values of leadership, excellence, integrity, and service very well, and it's been a privilege to work with him. So what do we do? Our mission is to protect and promote the public, the health and safety of our nation. We're known as America's health responders. We report to the Surgeon General. We're all active duty status, so we meet the requirements for basic readiness. So technically, we can all be deployed at any time to respond to the public health needs of our nation. So when disasters such as earthquakes or disease outbreaks like the Ebola crisis or hurricanes, the big hurricanes we had 2 years ago, or the wildfires, we're often one of the first to arrive on the scene to help people, whether that can be in our professional capacity, such as doctors or nurses tending to the injured, or as engineers helping with the logistics of the response efforts, or part of specific deployment teams, such as the service access team, where you help transfer patients from disaster areas to safe areas. So one of our biggest strengths is we're very flexible to adapt to the public health needs of our nation. So this concludes my brief introduction to the Public Health Service, and thank you so much for your time and your attention. And happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Thank you.
Suresh, please can you start?
You can start. It's good.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
So thank you everyone for joining us on a rainy Sunday morning. Myself and Lieutenant Tam are going to go over the slides, but this is more of a discussion and community engagement activity. So we want to hear from everyone. We have officers that will be jumping in, and other subject matter experts in the room that will provide some information. But why are we here? So the most important thing we're here, what connects us together, is the Asian community. We're a group of APOC officers, Asian Pacific Officer Association, and we are looking at specific health disparities in the Asian communities. And a lot of you are, I think all of you are parents in this room, and this one specific health disparity we're looking at is the need for mental health awareness among youth and then parent groups in Asian communities. We'll go over some of the information, but just to kind of get a sense of who's in the audience, who here has children that are age 1 to 5? Okay. How about ages 5 to 10? Okay. How about ages 10 to 18, the teenagers? Who here has kicked their kids out? They're graduated. So you continue to support your kids. That's part of being a parent, even after they get past 18, college years and things like that. And it's important because as part of Asian communities, we live in a kindred network, and we support our children, and then in return, they support you when you get older. That's the idea. Sometimes it doesn't work always that way. So we'll start with some of the important key messages in in mental health. Want to know if anybody here has any medical background? Anybody from healthcare field? Okay, we're going to be talking there'll be a lot of terms that we'll be presenting to you that are specific to mental health. Let us know if you don't understand anything, or if there's a specific term you want us to explain or go over, because it's a tendency for us to get into scientific terms and not stop. That's our day-to-day job. So we'll get started. Okay, so 6 key messages for that we want to present today is cherish. Cherish your children. Mental health is critical to overall physical, social well-being of every single youth. And we say that because oftentimes we don't pay enough attention to mental health, and we'll go over as to why. Mental health problems occur at a higher rate in youth than one would expect. We'll go over some of the statistical data on the mental health. And what can you do? So know the early warning signs associated with mental health problems, because that's what's going to key you into providing resources and help for your children. Know what could put your youth at risk for serious mental health problems. Specifically, we'll talk about suicidality among Asian youth. And know how to support, act, and link with professional treatment. Oftentimes in Asian community, at least in Indian community, I could say that the seeking out of mental health is looked at as a taboo, and we want to destigmatize that and make sure that understand that we want to destigmatize that and make sure that everybody understands that seeking their mental health is an important component of your treatment. Know that youth with support can heal and bounce back. So mental health is a ongoing process. Just like your physical health, you have to exercise. You have to work on your mental health to make sure that you are in a healthy place, your healthy frame of mind, so you can do your day-to-day activities. Okay. Key messages: mental health is critical to overall physical, social, and emotional well-being. It's all together a comprehensive process. Okay. So we just want to take time out on get any thoughts on mental health. If you have a specific idea, or what do you think? Like, just kind of open up for discussion. What comes to mind when you think of mental health? Is it disease? Is it suicidality? What comes to mind?
Emotional balance.
Emotional balance. Can you explain a little bit more on that?
Just being able to deal with what they have to, what approaches them, rolling with the punches, that kind of thing.
Okay. What is so let me ask you this: what does it mean by rolling with the punches?
Being able to respond to something that may be adversely or not adversely, even beneficial to them, but being able to respond in a manner that is healthy for them.
Yeah. As human beings, we're designed to react to fight or flight situations. Has anybody heard of that term before? Where tiger comes, you run or you fight, right? That's natural tendency behind our physiology. We don't have any tigers running around in DC, but we got plenty of politics. Traffic, right? So I mean,
It's not a stressful situation.
yeah, we've evolved where stress has become the number one risk factor to our health, and it impacts us both physically and mentally. And the mental part, rolling with the punches, is an important component. So, anything else comes to mind? Mental health.
Depression.
Depression. Okay. Do you feel sad today because it's raining?
No, it's like dwelling in negative thoughts for too long and how to help.
Sure. Can I ask you a question? What's your take on depression? Is it something that's permanent or is transient? Do all people experience depression at any one point or another?
I feel people do experience it at certain points in life that maybe they overcome. That's my
Sure.
thoughts on it.
Sure.
And if they do, it stays for too long,
Sure.
it can be a permanent thing.
Sure. Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. Has anybody heard of the term feeling the blues? You know, feeling down, feeling the blues, transient depression, malaise, and just. I'll defer to Lieutenant Pham because you're the clinical expert.
So seasonal, we've just had winter, right? And then do you notice your mood feeling a little bit down because we have shorter days where it's get dark earlier than usual. So you see a drop in your mood a little bit. You don't want to do a lot of physical activity. You want to be in bed a little bit earlier. So those are where we call it the blues. But also during the time for some mothers where post-depression, postpartum, where you hear a little bit of I'm having that blues. So it could be a short period of time, but if it's continue to impact your daily functioning, and that's where it becomes a longer period of depression. So depression is a spectrum where it's not like it's severe, but it could be going from a very short period to a long term. So depression is in that sense.
Let's hang on to depression because it's one of the number one risk factor for suicide among Asian youth. And it's an important one to discuss and it's an important one to address because depression is often the first, or the depressive behavior is often one of the telltale signs of something is not right? Kids not wanting to get out of the bed. It's one of them. So we'll scan through some of that. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, act. It also helps determine how we handle stress. We talked about stress. Relates to others, make choices. Mental health is important at every stage of life. At every stage of life. From childhood to adolescence through adulthood. Toddlers can experience mental health, impact of mental health by their mothers not holding them, nursing them. They have the brain power to be able to experience emotions. So mental health is a continuous process. It's not just when you're an adult or when you're a certain age. What factors contribute to mental health problems? We'll talk a little bit more about that. Biological factors such as genes, brain chemistry. So we talked about depression. One of the important things about depression is there's this neuroreceptor in your brain called serotonin, and that can be impacted by the physiological changes in your life, your genetics and other things. I'm gonna let
your sleep, your appetite, your health, wellness. Sometimes with physician, she can explain like thyroid problems that can affect your level and your mood. And we've seen people who experience with some thyroid problems have association with depression. People with, for example, with diabetes, they're limiting to the diet, their daily functioning, and that can also affect their mood. So medical and mental health kind of go together. It's a whole person. You just can't separate, I have a medical problem and a mental health problem. It's kind of linked together.
Who here has heard about schizophrenia? Okay. Can you share your experience on schizophrenia?
Okay, sorry.
Sure, anyone.
It's almost like fear and imagining things that are to be true, but like other people say no.
So a fear that is not logical in some ways, like irrational fear of something, right? Schizophrenia is a disorder, but leading to that, there's a different type of personality traits. One type is called schizotypal personality trait. And oftentimes, it's not frequent, oftentimes those traits can be traced to hereditary background. So you may be doing everything in your power to improve your mental health and physical well-being, controlling your environment, but sometimes there are genetic predispositions that might lead you to have imbalances in your psyche that will, predispose you to those traits. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is that sometimes we may not have control over our genetic factors. I may be the healthiest athlete, but my parents have hypertension, cardiac disease. There's a good chance I'll have that. But I know that. Now, what can I do? We'll talk about some of the therapies. We'll talk about some of the preventative components. Just knowing and recognizing that is an important component. So, do you want?
I just want to ask you up front, do mental health bring the term somebody's like crazy? Do you hear that term? That person is crazy? We often hear that more versus like, oh, there's depression, there's bipolar. We don't hear all that person is crazy, something going on. And that's in my culture, and that's what people refer to as mental health, mental illness, when they say stay away from that person. They're not normal. So those are the typical terms that you may hear or may see, and this is what we want you to be aware. It's just like a medical illness. If you have diabetes, you have to get it. You have to go see a doctor, get treatment. So mental illness is kind of similar. You just can't say, oh, they're crazy. Well, because it's a medical condition that they need help, and we can all get better when we go get treatment and service.
So mental health problems occur at a higher rate in youth than one would expect, and that is specifically true for Asian communities. It is estimated that 1 out of, take a guess, how many teenagers have severe mental health conditions? 3, 5, 10, or 12? Anybody wants to take a guess? Pick a number. It's not, we won't fail you.
No, right or wrong, just shout it out, the number.
3.
3 or 5?
3, 5, okay. So it is actually, who said 5? Yeah, that's 5. So 1 out of 5 teenagers will experience mental health issues. And that's normal. I mean, if you look at, given the circumstances and the academic pressure that our youth are facing, the need to get into Ivy League schools, to perform at a athletic event, and then on top of that, maintain Asian identity in a predominantly Anglo-Saxon country. It's a lot of pressure, right? Bullying, all those things that come into play. And then you have girlfriends, social media, all those things. We'll talk a little bit more about this. Next. Youth 12 to 19-year-old in the U.S. What is the leading cause of death in 2016? Youth 12 to 19 in the U.S. overall. Take a guess. Suicide? Okay. Actually not. It is unintentional injury, and that includes unintentional injury using a firearm, or it could be a motor vehicle accident. However, Asian youth 12 to 19 in the US are pretty safe. But what is the leading cause of death for Asian youth? Take a guess. That was a given, that was a free. So that's why we're here. That's why we are here on Sunday.
Mother's Day.
Mother's Day.
We all know you care about your children.
Suresh wore his white uniform in the rainy day.
And he made me too.
So, that's why we're here. That's why we're here. We know it's important. And we know that we need to get the word out. How is Sri Lanka doing? Right? Overall, in society. There we are. There's the United States. There's Sri Lanka.
The world rank number 31.
Right? We'll skip over the case scenario because we have limited amount of time. We'll come back to the case scenarios a little bit more. So let's get through this.
So just think about that stat, 1 in 5, right? So just think about all the student in your children's classrooms.
I have a concern. That statistic which you mentioned, Sri Lanka, is it the Sri Lankans who are in Sri Lanka or Sri Lankans like here? Like
Sri Lanka as a country, the people living in Sri Lanka has very high rate of suicide. Actually now it's going down a little bit after the war is ended. People don't feel that much pressure. I'm pretty sure we always heard that, like organophosphate poisoning. All the chemicals living around houses in farms, and it was pretty common, but now it's settling down.
So just remember that stat for your children, 1 in 5 students. So think about the classroom, 1 in 5. How many students in the class? So you just know. So that's a pretty high number. So keep that in mind when you're interacting, even with children at home. Just think about if you have 5 or 6. Just think about looking out for that awareness sign, and we'll talk a little bit more.
So know your signs and act early. So we're going to go a little bit more into as a parent. So if you think you know your kids better than anybody else. So as a parent, you suspect something is off, something is different. Don't ignore it, right? Know those signs, and we're going to talk about what those signs are. So at any point, if you have any questions, let us know. Stop us, okay? So changes in unusual behavior. So they're getting A's, B's, and all of a sudden they're getting C's and D's. Why? Like my parents would just beat me until I get better grades. But there's a reason why. I mean, there's a market. Okay, is it school too much? Are they in too many AP classes? Is it challenging? What's going on? You need to look at that. Poor grades in school, despite trying very, very hard. That's a very important thing. Difficulty concentrating that gets in the way at school or at home. They're distracted. They look distracted. They're not paying attention. They're always thinking. So they're thinking. Oftentimes it's common in kids who are bullied in school because they don't want to tell their parents what's going on. They feel ashamed or they feel afraid. So, but in the back of their mind, they are fearful to go to school. So they're always thinking, they're always like worried, and they're not paying attention to what they're doing. That's a common telltale sign.
Make an excuse to be home. I'm not feeling well today. Can I just stay home today? So those are a common sign when we deal with schools. Like, why was it today? Is there something going on? And you hear that usual complaint. I don't feel well. Can I just stay home, or can I leave early? Can you come get me? Something like that. That's some of the symptoms of being bullied.
This is a good one. Sudden and non-responsive to parents and disappearing. Right? Whose children have cell phones? How many times do you get panicked when you call them, they don't pick up the phone? my dad would call again. Why don't you pick up? Right? You don't want to be a tiger. Tiger parent?
Helicopter parent.
You don't want to be tiger parent. You don't want to be, oh, I see you, or AT&T, your phone is going here, there. That's not the point that we're trying to get to. Is that you need to trust your children, and if you can't find that accountability, but they're suddenly disappearing, they're not answering the phone call, or something's going on. There's periods of, that they're not answering. Those are signs that you want to pay attention to. Anything out of the normal, out of the unusual. They suddenly deleted their Facebook profile. Why? Why did they delete their Facebook profile or something else like that? Is everybody friends with their kids on Facebook? Or do they decline the Facebook? Right? So, those are the things that you want to pay attention to out of the usual things that teenage or young adults do that suddenly they stop doing. Right? Sustained negative mood and severe mood swings. Severe mood swings is a very important one because it could be a more than just psychological or more than social factor. There might be a physiological, a chemical imbalance change that may be going on that requires you to go seek professional help. I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Tam to explain a little bit more on that.
So the mood swing, we all know that our children probably go through a stressful time, especially during the time when they have to deal with like an AP test, right? During this time when they're worried about getting into school, graduation, it's a little bit more, the mood swing is a little bit more than just stress. It's where you see there's a pattern of these repeated patterns, just not today and then it go away and then. So you see weeks after weeks that they have this mood swing where they may be happy, they're normal, and then all of a sudden they feel so down. They don't want to get out of bed, they don't want to eat anything. They usually like to play the guitar or the piano, but they stop doing that. So you see there's a change in mood, there's a change in behavior, something that they have enjoyed doing, something they like to eat, all of a sudden it's like, I'm not feeling well, I don't want to eat this today, or something like that. You notice, and then it will go up, and then it may stay down low for a period, and then it'll go back up to normal again, and then it may go all the way up like, oh, I'm so excited, I can do this today, or of course we can go make this whole project. So there's that. It could be like really mood swing where it go high, like they can conquer the world, they can take on anything, or it's so low that they can't just get out of bed, just not have any motivation to do anything. Or it could be a period of time where they just low, that low key. So those are, you want to look at a repeated pattern, just not, today that they're because of some test or something happened, it'll trigger them to feel that way. But if that mood continue to be more than a few weeks, that's when you start reaching out and kind of ask, look into and start engaging with your children. And when you see that, just ask and then just let it go. But just keep that in the back of your head and revisit, in a different way. And we'll talk about there's ways that parent can ask versus, why are you not doing this today? Why are you not doing that? That's typically what would, keep your kids away from wanting to talk to you.
We're going to go into a couple of more serious components of mental health, and I want to also piggyback on the comment from Lieutenant Tam. If you've ever heard of bipolar disorder, bipolar means one pole to another. So you're constantly going from this to this end, right? So there's a high and a low. Somebody who is very, very productive, very, 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 very good academically, and then all of a sudden they get into a depressive state, and then they come up again, called manic state. So mania and a depression, it's a constant up and down roller coaster for them. That type of situation, you need to seek professional help. You need to get them to psychologists, psychiatrists, seek professional help, because therapy alone or just social changes alone will not improve that. There may be need for medication, and we won't go too much into what medications and things like that, but you need professional guidance for that. Does anybody have any questions? Has anybody heard of bipolar disorder? Has anybody heard of cutting? Okay. Can you talk a little? I'm sorry, I'm picking on you because you're our best audience. Can you talk a little bit more about cutting? Because it's an important factor.
It's when they feel like somebody feels like they need to self-harm themselves, so they cutting themselves is something that they can do and it's easy to do. So I guess they cut some places where they may not be seen, so that it's the pain is kind of almost like they feel like they need it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so we're going to talk about self-harm. It's an important thing to talk about because youth are at a highest level to experience self-harm, specifically cutting or other substance use things. But we want to mention that it's not just specific to youth. Adults may engage in that too. We just do it in a different way. But youth, it tends to present itself in cutting. And you hit the nail on the head perfectly when you said that there's a release, right? So somebody is so stressed out, or they have so much burden that they're carrying, the family burden, the studies, things like that. So they need a source of release. I'm so tired at work. I mean, I just want to go home and drink a beer. It's my release. Go home, have a scotch. I shouldn't say beer, right? Scotch. Have a scotch, right? So, I don't want to do anything else. I just want to sit down. There's a form of release. We all engage in that, like go for a run or something else like that. There's a positive release, there's a negative release, and things like that. And that's an important factor to address because oftentimes if you muffle that release, if you close that release, it could lead to a higher risk for suicide. So that's a important thing to pay attention to because it's a source of release, but yet if you don't allow them to release, they could lead to then higher risk of suicide because there's no avenue, right? So what do you do? So I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Pam.
I'm just going to interrupt there. So just in terms of talking about the release, that's definitely there. Adults have other ways to do it, but for children, they only have so many things that they can control. And that's one of the things they have control over is their body, and they have access to instruments. And so I think that's why it's particularly important when we're talking about youth and our children.
So the adolescent or the youth is where their brain is not fully developed. Our brain fully developed at the age of 25. So as our physician here mentioned, our youth, they don't know. They're learning how ways to control. And they're going through a time when they're learning to be independent and they're exploring their environment. And that can be stressful as you've always kind of have your parent to guide you and you're going through a phase where, well, I need to step up a little bit to be more independent, to not always have my parent kind of tied to me all the time. Of course, as parents, we don't want that. We don't want to hear that, right? But that's the phase where they're exploring, and it's this world is different. It's challenging through exploring now. So for them to have some type of control, also where just the cutting, but also about how about anorexia, where they can control what they eat and what they don't eat, and that's also another form of we see self-harm behavior where they just stop eating. You see weight, they're just losing weight and they're not keeping themselves healthy. Cutting is a form of release. If you ever, parent would probably have gone through times that we're in so much pain, right? There's anxiety, we go through a lot. We feel a sense of high pain in our body. And so that's where our youth is kind of feeling that way, and they don't know what to do. Sometimes they're anxious, they're feeling worried all the time. It's like something is just with them, and like they could be pacing back and forth. When you see some of the children where you see pacing, nail biting, but you see them sitting like this. It could be a habit they've done, but if you notice they start doing something, or they're on the phone all the time, they're getting so distracted, you see that they can, that is a form of like a lot of mental pain that they have. So self-harm, it could be poking something so that it's distract them from that pain. So that is a distraction for them, and that's the only way that they know how to stop that pain sometimes. It's just doing those cutting behaviors.
So what could you do in this situation? Just telling them to stop is not the answer. Usually, traditionally, Asian families, Asian culture, your behavior, your way to control your child's behavior is to get them to stop. Stopping is the end goal, but we need to make sure that we replace that negative behavior with a positive behavior. We need to provide our children with the resources and the outlet that they need to make sure that they have some way of releasing themselves. They need to understand what are positive reinforcements, negative reinforcements, and what are the ways to address that stress. This is a learning time this is a time that they're learning how to deal with stress. And when they're going to go out and get a job on the Capitol Hill, they need to be able to use those mechanisms. So this is not only important right now in college, but schools, but it's also important throughout, developing those behaviors is also important throughout their lives. Okay? So what are the risk factors associated with children's mental health? We talked about some of the overall picture we're going to paint here is that we talked about school, right? Family conflict being one of them. Children react to how their parents behave. If the parents are fighting in front of the children, you best believe that they're gonna pick up on that. They're gonna say, "Why is mom and dad fighting? Are you gonna get divorced?" They're worried. You might be just fighting because that's just how me and my wife talk. It's like, pick this up. But when we have a child in our life, we have to think about that, because they're watching TV, they're watching Bollywood, Hollywood, every single wood, and they're saying, well, usually parents get divorced if they're fighting. Well, those are things, and it might be the case if there is a situation where parents are not in agreement and it's leading to a relationship that's going to be a single parent. You need to know how to help your child navigate that, so that it has the least amount of impact on their social well-being. They need to feel safe. They need to feel safe at home. They need to know that both parents are available, right? So that's an important part. Parent-child relationship, we talked about a little bit of that. Please don't hit your children. That's a disclaimer. Intercultural and intergenerational differences. How my grandfather dealt with my father is different from how he dealt with me. It's a whole different change. We're living in a different generation and environment. It doesn't work. So, being an immigrant, right? So, who here is a first generation Sri Lankan? First generation immigrant. So who's here, immigrated here as first generation and naturalized citizen? Okay. Be proud. Bring your arms up. Okay, great. Okay, so all of a sudden you have a child who's only experienced the United States culture, Western society, right? You don't move here and you let go of all your values. Okay, I moved from Sri Lanka, I'm going to be American. That's it. Start from scratch. You know, you hold on to those values. Those are important to you. Those are part of your identity. That's who we are, right? So your child needs to. You can't simply say, oh, well, you know, you're Sri Lankan. You need to do this, or you're better than that. You're Asian. Asian. You know, well, what does that mean to them? They weren't born in Asia. To them, they're American. So you need to. You know, the values need to be explained. Those components. So being an immigrant, even if your child is not born here, is an important part of society. And that also is at school, because even though they're born here, they're going to be looked at as an immigrant. Right? We all know that. So, do you want to add a little bit?
Just piggyback on the culture aspect. Let me ask. Parents have expectation of children to be doctors, pharmacists, engineer, lawyer. Raise your hand if that is part of your expectation for your children, right?
Who has expectation that your child be a painter, artist?
An athlete. Social worker.
Athlete.
Right, so as growing up, just share my experience as we're called model minority Asian, where we see most of our like doctors or pharmacists or dentists or lawyer, attorney, engineer, all these perceptions we have about the society have about Asian. We're smart, we're good, we're successful. And that's not to say everyone in every culture. But imagine your children going to school and they're being looked as Asian. Now what's the perception and expectation for your children? To perform up to that group where we talk about Asian, right? I was fearful going to school because Asian, as Vietnamese, we're very good with math. So I know I have to get all A's in math and make sure I'm in calculus class. That's the perception that I'm held against. Like, I have to be good in this category. And even jokingly, you're Asian, you don't know your math? What is this? You know, it's like, so think about that perception. The pressure your children are being perceived by the society in general, and that's the stereotype that they have to perform. And when they hear parents talking about how successful their children, other children, especially during this graduation time, oh, my daughter is graduating as a doctor, or my son is this, and then, you know, your child's like, yeah, you got a bachelor in computer science. Okay, you know, so think about that and how that pressure the society. You think that it may, but the children are ingrained. And I'll share with you, my brother growing up, we all have hope. We're an immigrant to this country. We all have hope for our children to be better, right? So they grow up hoping to be doctors, and okay, he went to school. He graduated second in his high school, full ride to Yale. Families still have hope about him being doctors, because that's what he said, that his dream is to become one. He graduated from Yale, want to take a year off because school has always been stressful for him. When he was in high school, this kid only have about 4 or 5 hours sleep. All the AP classes that he had to take and pass the exam, and then to do extracurricular activity. He does the track team, he does all sorts of volunteer, want to volunteer in the emergency room, shadow around doctors, you name it, he does it. But then all that pressure he carried with him going to school, and now you're performing at Yale. You're at a different standard, and all your relatives and all your family are looking at you. That bar, that expectation, you're going to be successful. Right? Because they've seen how he performed in high school. Now they want that same perception at Yale, and now it's a big school, and you're competing against a lot of other students. He continued to carry that pressure. So one day he noticed, I noticed, he shared with me, I sometimes have dreams like waking up in the middle of the night. I'm late for an exam. That scared me. That means that this kid has just been ingrained with too much pressure. Even after graduating from college, he still have those nightmares sometimes where he's waking up that he's late for an exam. He's fearful and worried about that pressure of continuing to strive. So now that we're working with him through it, now he's going back to school, working through those times that he feels more comfortable now, going back to school, doing whatever he likes, instead of always have to be caring that, oh, I'm gonna be a doctor. We want him just to be happy of what he's gonna do with his life.
That's important. Thanks for sharing that. That's an important part. Do you want your kids to be successful, or do you want them to be happy? That's an important distinction, right? We want our kids to be successful because we want them to be happy. But is the definition of success to you the same as definition of success to your kids?
Self-identity.
Self-identity. Okay, so we talked a little bit about identity, what is it being an American? So, gender identity and sexual orientation. It's a big one, right? Asian communities, being gay, lesbian, transgender is not looked at as a accepted norm. Right? I mean, how many of you do you know a person who's gay, lesbian, transgender? Anybody in this room? It's the experiences that you face in those communities are tough. And I'll tell you my personal anecdote. So I'm a twin brother. I grew up in India, and we both identical twins. And we migrated here, and high expectations from my parents. You know, Sikh parents, Punjabi parents. You know, the strictest parent that you have in India. Punjabi parents, you know, they don't take no for an answer. And I was in sports, you know, I was in school. He's in school, but he's into arts, you know. And over time, like, there's differences start to show in both of our behaviors. And at the beginning, you know, he didn't understand what it was. You know, teenager, like, just not sure, like, you know, not into things. And one day, you know, school, and I think it's just over time, like, things that I didn't recognize. One day it comes out and says, you know, Mom and Dad, I'm gay. Oh my God, big shock. I mean, you tell the Punjabi parents, like, you're gay, you're not going to procreate and have children. You know, they're just like in denial, right? So they're like, oh, he's just going through a phase. Let's just ignore it. And then comes back, you know, a few times that, like, you know, look, this is not a phase. He's confident, you know. And the next time, it's just, the next comes the rejection. So we get through high school, and he basically is forced to leave the house. He leaves at age 18, we were in San Jose, lived in San Francisco, went to school there. And I'm so fortunate that he did not resort to any substance use, drugs, alcohol, things like that as a coping mechanism. He's like, you know what? I will show my parents that I could still be a model child, you know, even though I'm different. So, went to school. My parents at the same time, like, oh, you have to be a doctor. Same thing, you have to be a doctor, right? And I was like, you know, great, fine, you know, I'll go to college, went to junior college, went to this class, started preparing for my MCATs, and just like, I just don't want to do this. This is not for me. I just want to play sports. Just want to do soccer. I was a professional, started getting just professional swimming, you know, NCAA Division II, all that stuff. I said, this is not for me. I don't want to be a doctor. Meanwhile, like, you know, he's just shunned from the family. They rarely talk to him. 4 years later, we go to the same college, San Francisco, and I connect back with him because, you know, we've been compared against each other the whole time. You know, 4 years later, I was like, you know what? I'm going to join the military because it'll give me a chance to like do what I want to do and be able to do sports. So I joined the military, became a nurse. My parents will never forgive me for that. Like, oh, you're not a doctor, you're a nurse. Got my public health degree, and I started racing professionally. I raced bicycles for 5 years professionally, you know, like did sports, every sport I wanted to do. My brother at the time enrolled university, got his PhD, is now professor of anthropology in Towson University with a tenure track position. And he's actually a doctor, right? So where did that leave my parents, right? He is so highly regarded that he is called to almost every academic conference. He's actually going to be taking a year off in India doing a book, you know, doing studies. And I am, you know, I'm not saying that I'm not sure. I love to be here, but you know, you can't judge their value based on their gender orientation. His partner is in the State Department. You know, he's successful. They have a house in DC. I mean, what is success mean? He's happy, right? So he's happy. And oh, by the way, he is helping my parents more than I am because I don't have time to. He has summers off. He goes back. We help my mother. She has bad knees, knee replacement. He makes sure all the physical therapy is taken care of. And this is the same kid that they kicked out at age 18. So you have to think about that. So gender identity and sexual orientation is important, and those things play a role. And you know, we don't have control over that. That's an important part. So who your child is who they is. So you have to be willing to accept them for who they are.
Social media.
Next. Social media.
I think you all kind of know what's going on with the temptation, challenge each other about suicide, doing some of the risky behavior, right? Self-harm, bullying on Facebook, Instagram, discrimination. We can go on, academic pressure, we share about that. Substance abuse. Marijuana is legal in DC, right? So now that we're dealing with a whole different type of thing, explain to them we can go on and talk about, but explain to them what's legal doesn't mean it's good for them, it's healthy for them. Same thing with alcohol. But just kind of keep out what the substance abuse that may affect them.
So we're going to skip over some of the stuff because we spent a lot of time chatting. We want to get to some key messages, right? So how do we support, what do we do? So what is our goal? What is your one takeaway today? You know, this is the slide here. So we need to make sure that if you see, first of all, get to know your children, get to know them, understand their needs, get to know their psychology, get to know how they behave, what sets them off, you know, what are their triggers and what are the differences. Every child has emotional ups and downs, you know, understand whatever. And then don't be afraid to seek professional help. That's the number one thing that you could do to help your child. Therapy should not be looked at as a bad thing. You know, going to see a psychologist, a psychiatrist, you know, mental health doctor is not a bad thing. You know, a lot of times, you know, like people say, oh, you're going to see a mental health doctor? What's wrong with you? You could just snap out of it. That's not the case. You know, so oftentimes we go to a doctor for blood pressure or for diabetes, you know, so why don't we go to a professional doctor for mental health needs?
Share with you, take your kid early, because I work with the military population, I work with community, and my goal is always wish that I had some early intervention with a person that I'm seeing across today as an adult who's suffering with a lot of emotional pain, impacting their ability to hold a job, to have a career, to have meaningful relationship with other people. They're isolated, they're by themselves, can't have family, because some of these things that impacted them as when they were young. If someone had just helped a little bit, get them to the place where they can talk with someone. And don't perceive as taking your child to see because they're crazy or there's something going on. It's just if they're having diabetes, they need help. And this is the stage of adolescence, is where they're learning, they're exploring a lot of that independence that they're seeking. They are going through a lot of challenges. And go and get professional help. If you don't know, ask your primary care doctor. You see them the most. Take them in for a checkup and say, I'm concerned. I've noticed something different. Something just changed in my child. What can I do? And most of the primary care doctor be able to help talk you through it a little bit and kind of give you that referral. Let's see, try this. And if you think that if you just taking a child to see a psychiatrist, a psychologist, social worker, mental health out there, that they're just going to be going with medication, that's not true anymore. It's not true. Medication is not always the first line of treatment that your child will get. Going through therapy, and therapy takes time. Just like a behavior that you've learned how to eat, deal with your stress. You learn how to eat sweet or during those stressful times. It takes time to kind of change those behaviors. So when you take your child to see somebody, don't expect to change within a month. It's going to take months and months to change those patterns, change those behaviors. Some of the way to talk to your child about this is avoid the word why, but start with the word what or how. Why are you feeling like this today? Why are you not getting out of bed? Why are you not getting A's and B's? How about what is preventing you? How can I help you? What is going on? So just think about those magical words, what and how. If you catching yourself asking why, rephrase it in some way that you start with what or how, or tell me more.
Some of the things that you could do to take that time to be friends with your children. You don't have to be a parent all the time. Take that 5 minute, take that 5 minute, let's go out to lunch. Let's just go shopping together and spend time and ask them those questions. Talk about their social life. Who's your friends? I just want to know, and don't, the number one thing that you could do is don't judge them on it. Just talk, right? Take those opportunities and make it part of your behavior. Every week we are going to, regardless of what happens, we're going to go have a ice cream and sit down and talk. We're going to have me time, our time, right? Dad time, mom time. Have those discussions, and then from there you could see if there's any changes. And then resources don't have to be strictly medical. It could be a school counselor that could help you. Go to your PTA meetings, talk to them. Ask your school, do they have a counselor on site? With all the shootings, who's heard of school shootings? Just happened last week in Colorado again. Do they have a PTA counselor at site? Does your kid feel safe at school? Ask those questions, because those are important questions, and you're the ones who are opening up those conversations. You don't want them to close down.
And if the time that you sense that they may not want to talk to you, say that I'm worried about you, but if you're not comfortable talking to me, I can get you to talk to someone else. Or if you know that your child is close to an aunt or an uncle, some person, kind of ask that they talk to that person, or kind of reach out to that person a little bit and say, I'm a little bit worried, can you tell me what's going on? And leave it like that. Tell me what's happening, what's going on, and not necessarily point out every little thing that you notice.
We want to leave room for questions. We've kind of run out of time and open up a discussion. So we just want to, we threw a lot at you in 1 hour. A lot of information, a lot of terms, a lot of ideas, things that you might have heard already, may not have heard. So just what things come to your mind and what questions you have. If you don't have any questions, any comments you want to make, anything you want to improve on, or how we can improve our presentation for the future sessions.
When I listen to your presentation, I feel when we refer to children, they have some mental health issues, the factors you referred, I feel more than that, the reasons cause for those kind of issues brings as parents. For example, you refer that sexual things, the recognition, how you deal as the parents with the children, you shout, lot of things you are the one who brings for them. So, as solutions for these kind of things, we have to get educated properly how to treat your family, children, how you deal with them. That will give very positive benefits for them for these health kind of issues, I guess.
And we appreciate that feedback. We have 1 hour, and I wish that we have more time. Like you say, there could be some parent support group that kind of help deal with my child is having this, and parent can get together and kind of talk about some of the things that they go through and offer each other support. Like, this worked for my child. How about, could you try this? We wish that, and we are in the process of developing that. So we're kind of limited with what we can do within 1 hour, but thank you for your
But I think
feedback.
it's an important thing to understand, like, as a parent, what you said is that you have to learn first in order to teach your child.
Yeah, for example, like as Asian, as you mentioned, most of the parents have the attitude, the way of thinking is your children's to be the doctor, lawyer, this and that.
Sure.
That is not the right way of thinking, as we all know right now. I mean, our attitudes, the way of thinking should be changed first to understand the happiness is the best thing for them, not what you want to get it done from them.
I think it's important that Asian or non-Asian, we all rely on our personal experiences to answer questions, right? To deal with situations, problems, conflicts. And with the Asian parents, it is tendency for us to rely on our personal experiences, that personal experience that we may have gained in Sri Lanka or another environment. When that environment is changed, it is incumbent upon us to make sure that we teach ourselves how we change with that environment, right? Our children are not growing up in the same environment that we grew up in. There's social media, there's things that are different. Globalization has taken place. So and it's a good point, you need to teach that learning begins from us. What is the best mechanism for addressing this issue? It may not be the same as how my mother addressed it. Thanks for... Anybody else? I know you want to say something. I'd love to hear you.
I guess my question with this is, when do you know, as they're growing, they're changing so much, and how do you know when it's a point where that change in their personality or their character, they're developing, they're learning, and they're changing internally. So how do you know it's a point where you need to worry? I guess if you know your child, it is, but there's this kind of gray area where it's like...
It's easier when your kids are younger, right? So not many people raise their hands for like 10 to 18, I think was the number that we gave earlier. So teenagers are going to be, some of these things are like, check, mood swing, wants to sleep in because that's their normal physiology. So part of knowing your child really well is being able to communicate with them so you know what their baseline is. So when they're really skewed from it, then that's a warning to you. But once you become like a clinical diagnosis of having mental illness, right, that's the stigma part of all of this. If you have clinical depression, or maybe someone's got a schizophrenic diagnosis, those are people who can't function in normal society. So if your routine is to go to school and do your homework, if they really are like falling off the track from their peers, then that's a huge warning sign. But we bring all this to you. It sounds very dire and serious for Mother's Day morning, right? But this is the worst case scenario. So, I encourage you guys, I'm happy that everybody here is learning and wants more information about how to be able to pick out that warning sign, because it is 1 in 5 young or teenagers in America. But it's when it's really far off, and that's where, touching base with your child, knowing what their baseline is, and then talking to other people, experts, to be able to speak with them. And I think as a parent, you would be offended, because if they're gonna wanna talk to your child without you there, it's like, how can I let my child talk freely? They might say something like incriminating or like, something bad, but it gives them a space where they're not your shadow or they're not like next to you. And I think that's it. If you think there's a concern, then reach out for those experts, and you don't need to have your child there immediately, but if they say, that sounds like warning signs, why don't you bring your child in? Those experts tend to know how to talk with the child and get that type of information.
American Academy of Pediatrics has some excellent resources that talk about the stages of development in children. And there are a lot of good resources. It might be worth, some of them might be medically heavy, but it's good to like go over some of them. They talk about the different stages as to at what point does your child move into the next stage and what are the common behaviors during that time. So there are also a lot of good resources online that present. We'll provide you with a list of resources that includes Montgomery County Asian Pacific Islander website, and then you could request additional resources from them too. There's a lot of help out there. You don't have to look for it yourself. Those information is out there. So.
I also with her, it's very difficult to understand because of their from childhood to the young age, the change. You're not sure whether it's something going on in their mind because of mental, or whether their body changes. It's very hard because they are not that much changing at that point. It's even though you have a good relationship with the children, still they are kind of shy to share it with. Sure. So not sure whether really because of the body changes or something else. It's very challenging.
Yeah. I'll use my niece is a beautiful girl, like she's 6, 7, every picture I took of her, and I was going back and looking at the album, she's smiling every single photo, just this cute smile. I go back at age 10 and frowning face. Every single photo. Right? I mean, I'm like, can you smile? She's like, no. Start wearing like dark clothes, a lot of it is normal, natural, because the hormones change and things like that. And kids generally want to explore. They want to look at different things. So, some of it, you just want to pay attention to that. So.
Quick question.
Yes.
Will Suresh be sending the information, emailing this, the sites and all the stuff?
I already did. Because we shared it through.
I think we shared through the Kalakawe.
And I can
if
also
you haven't received it,
If you give us an email, right?
Yeah, we can email.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We didn't cover at the beginning, but the information covered in this presentation is put together by substance abuse, SAMHSA, Substance Abuse Health Mental Substance
Services Administration. That's what I was just saying.
Who she works for. They're the experts on mental health, right? They're the experts in mental health, and they have a lot of good resources on their website.
Just to throw out there for parents, as I work in emergency room, I get children coming in because of suicide. One of the signs that only you parent may know, or only a close person to the child may know, is when they start giving away something that they always cherish in their life, something that they value, and now all of a sudden you hear them or you see that they're giving it away. That's a very serious sign, to watch out for. Because does that mean that they're thinking about something else? Does it mean that they want people to remember them because they're no longer here on earth? Just be careful. My daughter, she has this blanket and she would not give it away. The day that I hear she's giving it away, I'm gonna have my antenna out. I'm like, what is going on with her? So that's something to keep in mind, because that's one of the factors that I hear when children are rushing to emergency room because of the suicide. One of the things that I ask parents, you notice this? I said, yeah. But those are just saying signs. Symptom is what's going on in their head that you may not know, but signs that you can see, something that we can see.
But to add to that, I'm pretty sure you will remember, right? We had one Sri Lankan teenage girl pass away just a couple of months ago. You know what she gave away? Their family car. She stole the family car, gave it to somebody else. And a few days later, we all know what. Not too long ago, right? Just in March or in February. Yeah, so keep an eye on it very closely. We don't want to hear another one of them, right? That's actually, sadly, that's the second Sri Lankan teenage suicide I heard since I moved into this area.
Any other questions?
Any other?
We're gonna stay here for a little while, just to, available, any questions, concerns, comments, feedback?
Can I offer one comment real quick? I know we've been sitting and absorbing a lot of information, so if you can wiggle your arm a little bit, that'll be good. How many of you here want to be happy? Right? How many want your children to be happy? Right? And so I'll give you this prediction here. I'm a psychologist. We don't normally do this as a living, but I'll give this prediction here, and if it's right, y'all got to cheer on the folks up here because they really speak to some important information. That all of you sitting in this room, everybody, nobody is immune to this. Everybody, all the docs and all the professionals here, everybody in here, at one point or another, encounters some form of stress, correct? And I would imagine too, as you continue on, all of you will encounter more stress. Being a spouse, being a family person, being a parent, being a vocational individual in your own community. Is that correct? Is there anybody who's never encountered stress? Right, so you gotta cheer them on real quick for me. Cheer them on. And I'll share this. And I think what Buddha has known all along is that in his teaching, he wants all of us to excel. And so therefore his first fundamental truth, the noble truth of the 5 pillars of Buddhism, is that life is suffering. And so he recognizes as an individual, as a human being, you will encounter stress along your way. And he knows to actualize, you need to first accept and deal with the stresses that come your way. And so as all of you encounter stress from your children and whatnot, what have you, when you're injured, as they've shared, you go to see your physical doctor. But when you're emotionally stressed, we tend not to because of our collectivism. I understand keeping that within the family, that's something to be a crutch. But let's reframe it and make it a strength for us so that we support each other. When we recognize one of our family members are struggling, come together and get them the support. So by doing that, then you'll be able to exercise. If you truly say that you want your child to do well, if you truly say you want to be happy, if you truly say that you want to do the best that you can, then accept the fact that you will encounter some stress, and when those stressors will come, reach out to these folks up here, because they're there to do the best that they can to support you. So I offer you that. And within the State Department, we work with a lot of citizens over in Sri Lanka, and that's one of the challenges that we see, is that the stigma. We're so terrified of being identified with it. But if you reframe it and see it as stress, that we all encounter stress. I myself see psychologists on a regular basis, because all the things that we have to deal with, and recognizing if I'm able to do that, then I'm able to excel in what I do. And I think by doing that as well, you would do yourself and your children a huge favor as they move forward. So with that, just off to that group. Thank you very much.
So, my name is Commander Tina New, and I'm the APAC chair. I would like to thank you everybody for coming out today, and especially I would like to thank you my officers, Commander Gill and Lieutenant Pham. Spending all that time explaining to you about Healthy Mind Initiative. And we will be sticking around for a little bit. If you guys want to have a story to share or to ask us questions, we have docs here and the supports for you. And once again, thank you for coming. I just want to leave with you one thing that I've noticing that I learned from the conference. The officer was telling me that sometimes when women talk to each other, mothers talk to each other, and they always talk about how good their sons are. Not talking about, oh my God, my son is not doing well in school. Even though you know something is going on, but you don't want to hear about that. You just want to say, oh, my son is better than yours. So don't try to compete, but try to camaraderie and try to understand and figure it out as community. Because if we are stronger as a community by just by the silo, working by yourself or competing with each other. So with that, happy Mother's Day to all of you. Have a great smile and enjoy your day. Thank you.